we were at that moment, as you can read in Joshua chapter 3, as we talked about, we're at that moment where they actually do finally, at last, get to cross the Jordan River. Now, there is a concept in literature and in movies that kind of exists sort of across different genres, and that concept is the idea of the plant and payoff. Actually, the Russian author Anton Chekhov probably has the best quote about this, and what he says is that there is a gun hanging on the wall in the first act, it must be fired in the last act, right? And he's basically saying, if you tell me that there is a gun or a sword or something, if you make the effort to tell me that this thing exists, you better use it. And I remember my wife talking about this when she was in theater school. Her first degree is in theater, and they used to talk about this all the time. That you really shouldn't build people up or include details that you aren't eventually going to pay off in some way the audience for, because frankly the audience will get mad at you if you don't. Right? Anybody who watched all the way through the television show Lost knows how annoying it is when they just let things hang and didn't resolve everything that they put out there. Right? I see some nodding. Yes, some fellow Lost fans. More contemporarily, if you are like me and like a big follower of things like the Marvel movies and things like that, you know why this scene that happens at the end of one of those movies is so important. So I'm not going to ruin this for you, but I am going to tell you, on one hand, this scene makes absolutely no sense in the context of like timeline and things like that. But two, the seeds were planted for this scene in one movie, and then there were like 17 more movies, because it's the Marvel Universe, and that's how Disney prints money. Yeah, do it if you got it, right? I mean, and then, of course, this is the final scene in the most recent Avengers film. And for those of us who waited a very long time to see this, we were really grateful to see it, even though it makes no sense. Okay. I know who my Marvel fans are, and I know there's 3 of you today, but at home, I swear this is killing. Okay. All right. Now, this isn't the best example of this, actually, in cinema history, and I want to talk about one more movie, and this one I am going to ruin because it's like 17 years old and a classic, and so if you don't know or haven't seen Citizen Kane, that's kind of on you. All right, but Citizen Kane is a very famous movie, really one of the first blockbusters, and it opens with the death of the title character and his final words being Rosebud. Thank you, Glenda. I knew somebody was going to have my back on this one. All right, his final words were Rosebud, and then basically really the whole movie is a progression of people trying to figure out what is, who is, what does he mean when he says this. And in the final scenes of the movie, we have a group of people surrounded by all of his stuff. So they're in this big, vast room surrounded by all of his stuff, and this guy's basically saying, well, maybe we'll just never know. Maybe Rosebud was not a thing, but it was a concept. It was an idea. Maybe we'll never know what it is. And you think that's the end of the movie, and then there's this great scene where we're panning over all of his things. This is all of his stuff in Xanadu, which is like, why would you not live in a mansion named Xanadu? So this is all of his things that, of course, they grab something. They start chucking stuff in the fire. And now I ruin the movie for you. Oh, okay. And all along, Rosebud was a stupid sled. And I'm sure at the beginning, like if you didn't know, and of course most of us, again, now it's ruined and I'm sorry. But most of us maybe already knew this is where it was going because it's such a piece of cinema history. I have to imagine if you're there in the moment, you're just like, oh, now we finally know. But I have to imagine the next thought is, and it's like, and it's a sled? Like really? That's it. Now, if you watch the movie, the sled has an important purpose, and yeah. Whatever, it's a good film. I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. You should watch it. Anyway, but very at the beginning of the movie, we have this idea of the plant, this idea of Rosebud, and then we spend the whole movie wondering what it is. And at the very last scene, at the very last thing, we get this payoff moment. And really, it's that payoff moment that really, in many ways, makes this movie a classic. right? And because you just feel something when that happens, when you finally get the answer to the question you've had from either page 1 of the book or minute 1 of the movie or whatever it is. That kind of moment is the moment we are dealing with today, when God's people finally, at last, step foot in the Jordan River. And in fact, this payoff is even so much more than that. Because as we talked about before, we've gone through 5 very long books of the Bible, to get to this point. Not only that, but in the story of God's people, we have all of these folks, we can debate how many, but usually hundreds of thousands of people who left slavery in Egypt 40 years before to travel a distance that probably should take a couple of weeks, right, to get to the one side of the Jordan. And so to finally have that moment where they're actually going to step foot in it. Now, a couple of things are important to also recognize about this moment is, as we talked about last week, or a couple weeks ago, is Moses isn't there, right? Moses is gone, right? That's why Joshua was in charge. So Moses is gone. Not only is Moses gone, Aaron, his brother, is gone. And not only Moses and Aaron, his brother, is gone, basically everybody who left Egypt is gone, right? The only 2 people that left Egypt who are actually there for this moment when it actually is going to happen are Joseph and Caleb. And we talked about them a little bit last week because they were the ones that went in and spied and came back and decided they should go anyway. So they were the ones that, in God's eyes, stayed loyal the whole time. So they are the only 2 that get to actually make it to the end of the journey. So we have this moment. Now, those at a certain point, and now we just have to cross a river. Now, crossing a river isn't an unheard of thing at the time. There aren't a lot of bridges or ferries or things like that. There are some, but not a lot. So the idea of fording a river is something that people would have done. Anybody who's played, the classic computer game Oregon Trail knows about fording rivers. John's my man. He's got me. And knows how dangerous it is, right? There's a little danger in fording the river. You might lose half your party or your oxen. It can happen. Break out your Apple IIe and play some Oregon Trail. You will have a better day. All right. But it's not a super uncommon moment. But it's also a really important moment. The act of moving through a river isn't necessarily an uncommon thing for people to do, but this particular act of people moving through a river is actually really important. So it will not do to just go ahead and do it. They decide, in fact, God tells them, you're not just going to do it, we're going to do it in a particular way. And basically what he tells them is, we are going to put some ritual, we're going to have some important actions that you're going to do along with this. So you're not just going to walk through the river. First thing you're going to do is you're going to get the Ark of the Covenant, which is this holy, sacred thing that they've been carrying around with them in the desert for many a decade now. You're going to get this holy, sacred thing, and that's what's going to go first. And everyone's going to follow behind it, but not too close behind it. You have to stay so far back. That's a rule. And the priests are going to carry this holy object through first, and then you are going to follow in behind the holy object that God set forth. Not only that, as Candy read for us so ably this morning, that when the priests do walk through, they are not simply going to just walk through the water. But what you hear at the end of what Candy wrote is God gearing up to the fact that God's not just going to have them walk through the river. God is going to part the river. And of course, if in our minds where we should be going and where the people of the day certainly were going in their minds, I'm like, oh, God's going to part the Jordan for us like God parted the Red Sea for our parents and the grandparents. The people who were at the Jordan didn't see that. They weren't there. But they no doubt heard about it from their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles. No doubt it had taken on something important in their minds. No doubt they knew that that was part of the experience of people up to them, that God delivered them in this important and amazing way. And even though the Jordan is not nearly as wide or as impressive as the Red Sea, God's like, I'm going to do this for you as well. And you are going to see a sample, a taste of what your parents saw. So God can't just let them cross a river, do this common activity, God says we're going to put some ritual, we're going to put some practice, we're going to put some signs around this so that you know that even though this may feel common, it is not, it is special. In fact, people have used, the church has used, and we have just used in general, people in general have used ritual and practice, things that we do to mark occasions to say that's not just something everyday, that's something special, and that's something important. We do it a lot in the church. And the other place we do it a lot is with sports, right? There are a lot of rituals around sports. And if you want to have a good afternoon, Google funny sports rituals because it's funny and you will laugh a lot. And I did, to the point that there's one I have to share with you, and that is a ritual that comes from the Detroit Red Wings. And apparently when the Detroit Red Wings, should be a picture before that one, hopefully. Yep. When the Detroit Red Wings score a goal, it is tradition to throw an octopus onto the ice rink. That is a true statement. To the point there are places around the ice rink that will sell you an octopus, and they will hand you a sheet of paper called Octo-Etiquette about how to properly do it. Apparently, you're supposed to boil it for a minute before you throw it on the ice so that it won't stick to the ice. This is a real thing to the point that that is that lady's job. They employ somebody to go on the ice and collect. And I guess it dates from like the 50s and, back when the playoffs was 8 games. And of course, octopus have legs, so you just got to climb the octopus. I still don't know. The metaphor breaks down really fast. I don't get it. Sports people are weird. I'm not really a sports person, but they do weird things. Okay. But it's a ritual. It's a ritual now, to the point that, and I don't think it's actually, this is not an endorsed thing, by the way. Part of the fun is figuring out how you're going to smuggle the octopus into the rink. I don't want to know. Okay. So we do this stuff, right? We put things in, we surround things with ritual to give them extra meaning, to mark them as important. That's not just a goal, but that's a goal on our way to the playoffs. The one that stands out to me, the story that stands out to me most about this was after my wife and I had moved down to Albuquerque. We were hanging out with some friends there and talking like you do, and we were reminiscing about, high school and things like that. And she had a bunch of friends that had come there from Southern California. And every once in a while, we discovered that people who went to high school in Southern California had a different experience than those of us who went to high school in Eastern Montana, if you can imagine. And one of the things we were talking about prom one day. I don't know why. We were talking about prom and formal dances and stuff like that. And then Dane started talking about it's you get there, then you got to wait in line for Grand March and do all this stuff. And then you can finally start dancing and having fun. And our friends look at us like we got 3 heads and they're like, what on earth is a Grand March? And we're like, what are you talking about? When you get all in a line with all your dresses and then your family all comes and sits in the bleachers of the gym and looks at you, and one at a time you come in and they announce you, and they come in and you're like, this is Jeremy Scott. He's being escorted this evening by Dane Rasmussen, and everybody goes, yes, and you move on, right? And then you all stand in a line until everybody gets to get through and be announced, and then, the parents all leave and you can start the dance. And these people looked at us like we were crazy. Some of you are looking at me like I'm crazy, and some of you are acknowledging because you live in a town that was cool and you did this. But honestly, as I think back about it, I'm like, how many times in my life, in my high school career, had I walked into that gym, right? For all sorts of reasons, some great, some not so great. It was a very different ritual I had when I walked in to take my SATs in that room. But this ritual, this idea of coming and standing and being escorted and having your name announced and everything that went along with it, right, gave that simple act that I had done 1,000 times in my life, entering a room, gave it significance and meaning and important, and marked that time as something important in our lives, something that important was going on. So I'm a big fan. Anybody's planning a prom, seriously consider. As my wife reminded me, apparently prom is actually short for promenade, so this is what you're supposed to be doing, is promenading. If you're not doing it, you're doing it wrong. Just saying. But we do this. And it can be important to us in big and small ways to mark the rituals that we have, to put rituals into our lives and rituals into our church. One of the things that actually I am mourning is that this month was supposed to be the month that we brought our acolytes back, and now it's going to be next month, and that's fine, because, we got to be safe and all that sort of stuff. But that act of starting worship by having our kids bring the light in, that it's not just me, lighting the candles, but for those of you who haven't been here, traditionally we would have acolytes, and the kids that would sit in the back, and they would bring the light, and we understood it as the light of Christ, and they would bring the light, and they would actually bring the light into the service and light the candles as part of the opening song. And on one hand, okay, maybe they're just opening, you can look at it and go, well, they're just lighting candles. How many times have we written lighting? Have we all lit candles? On the other hand, you're like, no. It's more than that. It is the bringing in of the light of Christ. It's the symbolic act. It's the ritual act of bringing the light of Christ into this space and recognizing why it is we are here and what it is we give this time for and why we make space for it. So my heart yearns for that, and I am looking forward to the time in February when we get to bring that piece of our ritual back, because it has meaning, it's important, and it marks something. It marks something. It marks the beginning of our time together. It marks the beginning of our time of worship. Rituals are important, maybe in sports. Rituals are definitely important in our church, and rituals are also important in life. And there are little things, no doubt, that we all put into our lives that are little rituals that we do. I have a little ritual, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I have a little ritual that I do every time I get on a plane. Because even though I know how planes work, and I've been on a lot of them my entire life, it's still mildly miraculous to me that that giant metal thing stays in the air. And I am grateful and hopeful that this one will too. So I have a little ritual. I've been caught by a couple of flight attendants walking in, and I've had one say, "Are we all okay now? Are we blessed?" And I'm like, "Yep, we're good." But I have a little ritual, and I don't even know why I started, but it's the thing that I do, and I don't feel right when I get on a plane if I don't do the thing. And now you're all curious, and I promise you whatever you're imagining is far more interesting than the reality. All right. But these rituals help us mark life. They help us mark time. They help us remember what's going on. They can also help. I was reading a book by a guy that's really it's all about ritual and the power of it. And he talks about Sabbath, that thing that we all know that we need that we don't do, right? The time that we need to take that we know we don't take. The time that God gives us and tells us every week we should spend at least one day in rest and in contemplation. We should spend one day focusing on our need and our desire and our ability to love God, love neighbor, and love ourselves. And Sabbath really is about that loving God and loving ourselves time, when the reality is so much the other of our time is about loving our neighbor, as it should be. So the idea that the Sabbath time is important, and oftentimes the barrier for us actually taking and doing and taking the time that we need and we are allowed and frankly we deserve, not because we're special, but because God says we deserve it, sometimes the barrier is that we have no ritual around it. So the author was talking about the fact that one of the things he does every day is every week he takes a 24-hour technology Sabbath, where at sundown on Friday, in the traditional sense of Sabbath, so on sundown on Friday, he takes all of his technology, his laptop and his iPad and his phone, he sticks it in a drawer, and then he lights a candle, and he watches the sunset. And he says he can literally feel almost like his body is melting. Like the expectations are melting, everything is melting, and he knows he's not going to open that drawer again until sundown on Saturday. And his friends know that he's going to do it, so if they text him or whatever, he's not going to reply. And it's not that he doesn't go out in the world, and it's not that he doesn't do things, but just not being tethered in that way, in the way that we can all feel tethered by our technology, is enough to help him have the Sabbath and the rest and find the space that he needs, whether that is to read or work out or whatever it is. There's a great quote from Abraham Joshua about technology, because I think for many of us, the barrier we have to taking the Sabbath we need is things like their phones and things that demand our time and energy. He has a great quote, Abraham Joshua has. He says, the solution to mankiind's most vexing problem will not be found in renouncing technical civilization, but in attaining some degree of independence from it. It's not about renouncing the technology. It's not about saying all the good that our phones can bring and the connection that we have with each other is a bad thing. It's not about renouncing it. It's about making sure that we maintain some independence from it. And what I think is most amazing about that quote from Abraham Joshua is he said it in 1951. The challenges we have today are not new. The Israelites need to mark the occasion that they are having. So much has gone into bringing them to that moment where they are going across the way, across the river. It will not simply do for them to wade in like they have 100 times before. They must mark the occasion. They must recognize that it is special and that it must recognize that it is sacred. So God tells them, get out the ark, put it in front of you, and you will walk across dry lands like your parents did. In the same way, maybe not quite so grand, but we are all invited to put rituals into our lives. Little things that mark time, little things that remind us of what it is that we ought to be doing, little things that give us permission to take some independence from all of those things that weigh us down and give ourselves permission to spend some time with the one who wants to lift us up. God wants something good for God's people, and it's on the other side of the river. God wants good things for us too, and good things for our lives. Oftentimes, those good things that God wants from us is on the other side of maybe it's our cell phone and maybe it's our laptop, or maybe it's just the expectations we have that we are supposed to be busy all of the time. One of the things that's happened to me a lot in life and a lot of ministry is I get to be around people when different things happen in their lives. And one of the things I've gotten to be around a lot is people who get to transition in that magical time that I've heard actually exist called retirement, right? Where you get to leave behind. You don't know anything about it. Don't laugh over here, Jim. But you get that time where you get transitioned out of your working life into something else, and it's become kind of standard practice to me. It's like, I'm so glad you're retired. Welcome to your life being far more busy. Because I have yet to meet a retired person who hasn't said to me, I'm busier now than when I was working. Because frankly, there is so much in life to do. There are so many good opportunities to do. There are so many ways in which we can do things that, yes, help us love God, love neighbor, and love ourselves. And all of those things are good. And then sometimes the thing we need to do is nothing. The thing we need to do is rest. The thing we need to do is claw back a little bit of independence from all those things that are placing demands on our lives and recognize that God has something good for us. Joshua's people have to mark the time. And Joshua's people do mark the time. God's people mark the time by following the ark and making that thing that they do special. Let us remember that God can always make the everyday, that experiences we've done 1,000 times, whether that's walking into a river or walking into the gym, that it is possible to make that sacred and special, and that we are given the tools to do so. So let's think. What are the rituals we need to put into our lives? What are the little candle lighting reminders that we need that we are loved and lovable and that we are given permission to follow where God would have us follow and to rest when God would have us rest? Amen.